Good afternoon and welcome to BBOC Live, presented by BetMGM. It's 5 p.m. Eastern, and this is the College Football National Championship betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, are my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Collin Wilson and the one and only Mr. Brett McMurphy. We have a lot to get to today around Michigan-Washington. We'll give our favorite prop here in just a moment. We'll also give our favorite bet on the actual game, whether it be a side or total. We'll check in with Evan Abrams for some national title game trends, and also check in with Mike Calabrese, one of our other BBOC co-hosts, who has a pretty large parlay riding on tonight's game. We will get his parlay and then react to it and what we would do. But first, before we get started here, I want to remind everyone to make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there, in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. And as I mentioned previously, BBOC is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. You can feel the drama in the air. I love these 2 days. It's like week 18 NFL. You get your playoff matchup set, and then, hey, we have the College Football National Championship with some new blood. Two teams who have not won a national title since the BCS era began in 1998. Collin, can you feel it in the air? Are you excited for tonight's game?
I can feel it. I love it. We have two clashing styles here, two completely different teams on how they run their offense. Got some financial investment going on for me on the Huskies. Got to figure out what to do with that. And I love some of the props on the board right now. I expect them to move by the time we get closer to kick. I'm ready to chop it up here.
Yeah, let's get it started. Let's first check in with our leaderboard. No one's catching me this year, so I will take the title. But I will say, you guys both got hot for bowl season. Brett, you finally took your first loss with Texas because Quinn Ewers couldn't figure out how to throw it in the end zone at the end of the game. But you've been hot, Collin. You creeped over 500, so let's all finish strong here. And we'll start off with, let's go to the prop show. Let's start with our favorite props of the national championship game. I'm going to go with Colston Loveland anytime touchdown. I also played just a little sprinkle for fun on first touchdown and Michigan first touchdown score. But if you look back at what Washington has done against tight ends this year, even last week against Texas, Sanders had, I think, 7 catches for 80-plus yards. They've allowed 10 of the 13 teams they've played this year to go over their season-long production at the tight end position. And they played a number of teams who don't even really use the tight end. The one exception was against Oregon State. That was a weather game. But, in the 2 games against Oregon, the tight ends for the Ducks had 3 combined touchdowns. I think Michigan's going to go with a run-heavy game plan here. I think they're going to have success doing it. What's that going to lead to? Safeties have to start creeping up. Linebackers are going to have to start playing downhill. And especially in the red zone, I think that's going to open up some play-action opportunities for Loveland. I think he might find pay dirt here. I like this number. So let's go with Loveland anytime touchdown. Collin, let me throw it to you. What is your favorite prop for the national championship?
Let's stay on the Michigan side. They love to run the ball. They are highly successful at it, and Washington cannot defend it, especially in the red zone. I'm going to take Blake Corum, 2+ TDs. Number out there is plus 135. I've seen some plus 150s. But let's talk about the math here, because the math is just incorrect for these odds. He's had 2 rushing touchdowns in 9 of 14 games. You count the all-purpose TD catch that he had in the bowl game last week, he's actually had 10 of 14 games where he's had at least 2 touchdowns. That's 71%. That is implied odds of minus 245. This number should not be plus money here on Blake Corum. 2+ TDs. When you look at Washington, 112th and red zone rushing TDs allowed. That's bad news for the Huskies on their defense when they get into scoring position for Michigan. And just 3 non-quorum touches in the red zone in the last 5 games dating back to Penn State. 2 of them went to Donovan Edwards, 1 went to Samaj Morgan, but every other touch has belonged to Blake Corum in the red zone. 2+ TDs for Blake Corum in Michigan. For me, anything plus money works.
Love it. Brett, what do you got here for your favorite prop?
Probably doesn't sound very smart, but I'm going to go under passing yards for Michael Penix Jr. under 294. I mean, look, he's gone over this number in 11 of 4. Excuse me, he's gone over this number in 11 of 14 games. But Washington has not faced a pass defense that is ranked in the top 50 in the country. Michigan's number 2 passing defense. They allowed 271 to Ohio State, 247 to Maryland. The only 2 teams that have gone over 200 yards. Obviously, Penix is a much better quarterback than anything Michigan has faced. But I think Michigan is going to control the ball. They're going to limit possessions for Washington. So I think this leads to less opportunities for Penix. And also, Michigan knows the only way they can lose this game is if Penix goes wild. I think they're going to have guys set back, make Penix throw shorter passes. I think they're also going to try to get some pressure on him, which nobody's been able to do. Ultimately, I think Michigan controls this game, limits Penix and Washington's possessions, and somehow, some way, it stays under 294.
Yeah, Michigan wants to control the clock, long, grinding drives, and their best defense, and they do have a very good defense, but their best defense might actually be their offense. So don't mind that one at all. Let's take a quick break in the action and throw it to our colleague Evan Abrams for a trend report.
Thanks, guys. All right, let's start with a market report. So all week, Washington has been above 60% of tickets as an underdog, which is pretty fitting considering Washington and Kalen DeBoer is 5-0 straight up and against the spread as an underdog. He is the only coach 2-0 straight up or better as an underdog since he was hired. Now, that's a good history from Washington's point of view, but it's a pretty bad history from the college football playoff. So 5 underdogs have closed with 60% of tickets or more in the college football playoff. They are 0-5 straight up, with those dogs failing to cover the spread by 21.8 points per game. Just a terrible history. So Washington good, but the playoff not so much. And then finally, future tickets. So Washington entered the regular season at 40-1 to win it all. Michigan at 8-1. So if Washington wins it all, the largest odds to win the championship since 2001 would be Auburn in 2010, then Ohio State in 2014, LSU in 2003, and Washington. If Michigan wins it all, here's the only note you need to know. 8 of the last 9 winners would be under 10-1 in the preseason. Only 2019 LSU would be the lone exception. Enjoy the game. Back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Evan. All right, let's move on to now our best bet for the actual game. You can go side, total, half, however you want to spin it. I'm going to go against the early market move here and go with the under. First, I will say this game was very difficult to handicap. Like, you look back at past national titles, I can't remember one where I've had this much uncertainty with both teams. Washington, which their final 10 wins all came by 10 points or less. They went 8-0 in one-possession games. They had a stretch where they could have lost to some bad teams, but they had injuries. They had the flu. And they don't have as much depth as the normal elite teams in the country, so their defense really took a hit. Penix wasn't himself. So where exactly do you power rate this Washington team that's really peaking at the right time? And then Michigan, clearly the best secondary that Washington will face, and their numbers are elite, and they have 3 great corners. But what quarterbacks do they really face, right? Drew Auer, Kyle McCord, Talia. It's not a murderer's row of quarterbacks. And then Jalen Milroe is limited as a passer too in the college football playoff. So taking a leap of faith with some of the numbers that we have for Michigan. But I do believe in this Michigan secondary. This will be the biggest test for Washington. And we talked about with Brett's bet earlier, I think Michigan's going to control the clock. They're one of the slowest teams in the country. Clock will be the ally of the under here. Washington doesn't play fast either, but I think both defenses will do a good job of preventing the explosive play. Michigan will see if they can get pressure. That might be the key to the game and throw off Penix. similar to what Arizona State did. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of explosives. I think there's going to be some red zone stops. Both teams are going to play at a methodical pace. Maybe you get some early nerves as well. But I like the under. Let's go low. Collin, how about you?
I'm going to take Michigan to win this game. I'll take the points. Washington defense just cannot force passing downs here. Expect Michigan to line up, put 8, 9, maybe 10 guys all blocking for Blake Corum or whoever is going to be running the ball, maybe Donovan Edwards, but they use a combination of counter, power, inside zone, a lot of things that Washington absolutely has not been able to defend all season. They have some horrible run blocking numbers. Michigan can be methodical here all day and just eat up clock and run. Now, if you go to the other side of the ball, Stuckey's right. This is a really tough handicap because Michigan is second in on-target allowed rate. What that means is they don't allow targets, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, to catch the ball in stride and take off down the field. But then again, as Stuckey pointed out, look at these list of quarterbacks that Michigan's gone up against. But what we can say is that this Michigan Wolverines defense, the secondary specifically, is better at ball hawking and contesting catches than Texas was last week. So there should be some resistance into what Penix did. So many 50-50 balls last week that went Washington's way. I expect there to be some resistance here with the Michigan secondary. And then finally, penalties. The national championship preview piece I put out has a very long, extensive look into ACC ref Marcus Woods and what he likes to throw flags on. 14 per game, heavy in pass interference, heavy in personal fouls. And if you look at the splits, Michigan is second in the country in penalties, Washington 132nd. So the flags I expect to be thrown at Washington here, but I'm going to take Michigan minus the points.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting handicap when Washington is going to be throwing the ball. But as you mentioned, I look at Michigan's defense as just the better version of Texas, right? Really good interior defensive line. I think Michigan might even have a deeper stable of edge rushers, but it's not, they don't have star edge rushers. But Texas's clear weakness was at cornerback, and they didn't have the ball skills. And also they didn't allow them the flexibility to try some of the things that, Arizona State did with some cover zero blitzes and press. So we'll see if Michigan, which has the corners to play more press, if number one, if they can hold up, number two, if that can get to Penix. But yeah, I agree. I think that this Michigan defense is kind of the Texas defense, but with better corners, which you need against Washington. So that should be a fascinating matchup in of itself. Brett, you were on board with the Wolverines?
Yeah, Stuck. I think Michigan wins this game by double digits. For Washington to win, they would have the worst defense of any national champion. They're 53rd in scoring defense, 94th in total defense. The only defense of a national title team that can come close to this was Auburn when they had Cam Newton. I spoke to some folks at Texas, and they said basically the Texas semifinal Sugar Bowl game was basically Texas's worst game of the year, they felt. It wasn't an excuse. It's just a fact. And they still came down to 4 throws in the end zone to actually win this game. Michigan also, recruiting-wise, you look at the recruiting classes over the last few years, Michigan simply has better players. Washington's been an unbelievable story, but kind of what we talked about earlier, I think Michigan controls the game. Their offensive line will be the difference. And, they're going to limit Penix. And if Michigan doesn't make the special teams mistakes like they did in the Rose Bowl, I think they win comfortably.
Yeah, those were very uncharacteristic from a usually rock-solid Michigan special teams unit. I also think that this game, both the side and from my total too, will be heavily impacted by who gets up and who takes a lead. Michigan has gone into the half with the lead in every game this season. If they can do that again, then they can still play their methodical, let's run the ball. But if Washington gets up, right, and forces Michigan to play faster, throw more, maybe that leads to some mistakes. It's definitely going to lead to a different type of game script. But I think Michigan's more likely to get out in front. But be interested to see who gets out to the quick start, because that could have an impact on both the side and the total. So both of you guys going with Michigan. I'm going with the under. Good stuff there. But let's have a little bit of fun and check in with Mike Calabrese on his pending parlay, which he basically just needs something to happen tonight.
Thanks, Duck. As you guys know, I am on the Washington Huskies, not plus 160, but at 764 to 1, thanks to my big time parlay with Lamar Jackson winning NFL MVP. Hopefully, the voters do the right thing. But I also like Washington just to win this game. I do think they have value plus 4.5 or 5, depending on where you're getting in the market. I also think at plus 160, there's still value on the Huskies at this point in the season. I have them winning this game 31-28, and it really comes down to the trenches, which I think there's been an overreaction to how good Michigan's defensive front is. Texas was also incredibly stout at the interior of their defensive line, and I think Washington was still able to find ways scheming Dylan Johnson in the running game. You saw one of his early rushing touchdowns. They had him kind of lined up as a slot fullback, H-back kind of position and handed it off to him. I think that's what it's going to take from Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer, getting crafty, moving people around pre-snap, and getting their playmakers in space. And I trust him to do that because he's done it the entire season. And then on the tackles, the bookend tackles for Washington have been incredible this year. They've given up a grand total of 4 hits on the quarterback throughout the entire season. And I think that's the difference maker here. Michael Penix Jr. was absolutely surgical against Texas. The stage wasn't too big for him, and I think if he has time to operate, he's going to be able to find one of his 3 receivers. Yes, Will Johnson is an All-American caliber cornerback, probably going to be a future top 10 NFL draft pick, but he's probably going to draw a Dunze for the majority of this game. So who's going to take Polk? Who's going to take Jalen McMillan in the slot? I think that is the key mismatch in this game. He's a number 1 wide receiver in number 2 receivers clothing, and I think you've seen now that he's healthy, in the last 2 games, he's got 19 targets. He's turned that into nearly 200 receiving yards and a touchdown. I think he's going to be able to hurt this Michigan defense downfield, out of the slot, moving him in motion pre-snap, making it difficult for them to take him away, whether they're doubling him or they're rolling coverage to him. And for that reason, what I'm doing, if you want more of a long shot prop in this game, take an anytime touchdown on McMillan and Washington to win by 1 to 6 points. As I mentioned, they've won 8 one-score games this season. Let's make it 9, and let's cash a big one here at the end of the season. All right, back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Mike. So the Lamar Jackson MVP, I have a bet on that as well. I think it's pretty much a lock, but it won't be announced until I think the day before the Super Bowl or the week of the Super Bowl. So basically just comes down to tonight. And would you hedge? People always ask me this. I get DMs, tweets multiple times a day. Would you hedge this? Should I hedge this? Should I hedge that? The answer is always, just like in finance, when it comes to head betting question, it depends. Number 1, it depends. Why did you bet it when you first put the bet in? Number 2, is it life-changing money? Number 3, has anything changed? Number 4, what's your personal financial situation? Has that changed? What's your risk aversion level? Like all these different things. It completely depends on the actual bet, your personal situation. So like there's no blanket rule. So like in this situation, if I really liked Washington, I would probably just let it ride. In my personal situation, I kind of like Michigan. I think Michigan's going to win, so I would probably lock up some profit. But Collin, I know you have a Washington future. What would you do in this situation? Or you can just kind of talk about yours, but you're gonna buy off some.
Yeah, I have a Washington 100 to 1, one of the only ones that I think that are out there, and it is pretty pricey. It's not life-changing money for me, but I completely agree with you. It's a personal decision. It's a finance decision. And for me, it was pretty clear about 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, that it was time to start protecting this ticket. And that's why you see things like Oregon 30 to 1, or you see an Alabama future come into the app. There have been ways for the last 5 to 6 weeks to protect this ticket. All said and done, I'll have 25% of this ticket covered going into it pregame. About 15% more of it I plan to do live during the game, which is probably going to put me about 40% into Michigan. That would eat up that 100 to 1 on Washington. But it's really a dream scenario here. I mean, this is exactly what you play for. And when I bought the ticket, you think, I have to avoid Georgia. I have to avoid whoever the SEC power is. Well, we got that. Then I need a likely matchup in the semifinals. We got that with the Texas secondary. But it's really up to the person that holds the ticket and your financial situation and the whole thing that you said about life-changing money. For me, I am completely comfortable with only having 40% of that ticket on Michigan. If Washington wins, great. Either way, there's a cash and we move on to next year. I'm already ready to bet a team for the 2025 national championship. So look forward to it. But me personally, I'll have about 25% to 40% on Michigan to cover up that Washington 100 to 1.
Gonna win all that money and blow it on Brady Cook. Brett, what would you do here?
Well, I think Michigan's going to win. So, I would hedge it, but it's tough. You get to that point and you're like, you want to let it ride. But yeah, I mean, specifically for this game, I would hedge. I just don't think Washington. This is a bad matchup for Washington. So good luck, Mike. Good luck, Collin, on your future. Hopefully, you'll fare better on that than you did in 9-ball this week against me. So go Wolverines. And then I do have some breaking news. There's some uncertainty about Jim Harbaugh's future. I've been told by sources very close to the family that outside the Harbaugh home on Monday night, if you see black smoke coming from the chimney, he's going to the NFL. If you see gray smoke, they're having brisket. So keep that in mind for you Wolverine fans out there.
Black smoke potentially for the Raiders. All right. Good stuff there. I think I will just to add one final thing. Collin brought up live markets. Keep that in mind whenever you're hedging. You can hedge some pregame and then keep your options open. Now, granted, you lose some of that uncertainty, but it provides you with a little bit more flexibility. And then you might even be able to get a better price or potentially be able to middle, depending on what happens early in the game. So always evaluate all of your possible options and shop around as always. But good stuff, guys. Enjoy the game tonight. Thanks to Collin, Brett, Mike, and Evan for joining me. Thanks to our producers on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. That really helps us out. One final reminder, make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. If you haven't already, you can find all of our bets there, in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. And also BBOC, presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. It's been a pleasure all season. This is our final show. We will have more live shows covering college basketball. But until next season, good luck on all of your final wagers. Cheers.